The rooftop of the downtown art gallery was a scene stolen from a dream. Strands of Edison bulbs swayed gently in the warm evening breeze, casting a golden glow over linen-draped tables. The city skyline stretched out below, its lights flickering like stars that have forgotten how to fade. A jazz band, real, not some canned playlist, filled the air with a saxophone's mournful hum, weaving through the clink of glasses and the low murmur of corporate small talk. Glass sculptures caught the light, their edges sharp yet impossibly delicate, while abstract paintings leaned against steel beams, all bold colors and jagged lines. The event planners had outdone themselves, blending elegance with a modern edge that felt almost too perfect, like the night itself was auditioning for something unforgettable. I stood near the open bar, the weight of a whiskey glass cool in my hand, the other holding a Sauvignon Blanc for Katerina. She was late, as always, probably gliding through the crowd, her smile polished to a sheen that could charm executives and interns alike. That was Katerina, poised, professional, always performing for a role just out of reach. I didn't mind waiting. I never had. I scanned the rooftop, catching glimpses of colleagues laughing too loudly, their ties loosened, their faces flushed with wine and ambition. The air smelled of oysters and summer, and for a moment, I let myself believe this night could be ours, a rare pause in the chaos of our lives. Then I saw her, in the far corner, with the shadows pooled thicker near a tall patio heater. Her silhouette was unmistakable. The black, off-the-shoulder dress hugged her frame, a choice she hadn't worn in months, not since the early days when she'd catch my eye across a room and hold it. Her hair was swept up, exposing the curve of her neck, a detail that once made my heart stutter. But it wasn't her beauty that stopped me cold. It was the way she leaned in, her body angled toward someone else, her laughter soft but unguarded, the kind she hadn't given me in years. The man was Marco, a new hire in partnerships. I'd seen him around the office, sharp suit, sharper smile, always a little too eager to impress. Katerina had mentioned him once, maybe twice. He's helping with a project, she'd said, her tone so casual I hadn't thought to question it. Now, her hand rested in his, their fingers interlaced like a secret they didn't care to hide. They weren't talking like co-workers. They were in their own world, the kind where the rest of the rooftop, me included, didn't exist. I stood frozen, the wine glass trembling in my grip. My chest tightened, a dull ache spreading like ink in water. I told myself to move, to look away, to pretend I hadn't seen. But my feet carried me closer, drawn by some masochistic need to know. Her voice reached me first, low and intimate, slicing through the jazz and chatter. "Lucas is dependable," she said, her words soft but clear, like a confession she didn't know I'd hear. "He's easy. You don't even have to try with him." She laughed, a light, careless sound that cut deeper than any scream. Marco laughed too, a knowing chuckle, as if I were a punchline they'd both rehearsed. The world tilted. The lights, the music, the clinking glasses, they blurred into a haze, and all I could hear was her voice, those words looping in my head. Dependable. Easy. Like I was a piece of furniture, a safe bet, a man who didn't demand more than she was willing to give. I don't know how long I stood there, a ghost in my own life. Around me, the party pulsed on. A woman in a red dress brushed past, her perfume sharp. Someone dropped a fork, the clatter jarring against the rooftop's hum. A colleague waved at me from across the crowd, but I couldn't move, couldn't smile. Katerina didn't see me. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Her head tilted closer to Marco's, her smile brighter than it had been in months, maybe years. Why don't I shout? Why don't I storm over, demand answers, make a scene? The questions churned in my mind, but my body stayed still, rooted by a truth I wasn't ready to face. This wasn't just a moment. This was the end of something I'd been too blind to see crumbling. My fingers tightened around the wine glass, then loosened. I set it down on the nearest high-top table, the liquid sloshing slightly, and turned toward the exit. No broken glass, no raised voice, just the steady thrum of my heartbeat drowning out the jazz. The elevator doors closed with a soft ding, sealing me in silence. I caught my reflection in the polished steel, eyes hollow, jaw tight, a man who'd just lost something he couldn't name. Dependable. Easy. Her words echoed, carving a scar I knew wouldn't fade. As the elevator descended, I leaned against the wall, my breath shallow. The city waited outside, its lights still shimmering, its streets still alive. But up there on that rooftop, I'd left behind a version of myself who believed in us. And as the door slid open, I stepped out, not knowing where I was going, only that I couldn't go back. The apartment was too quiet when I got home. The kind of quiet that presses against your skin, heavy with things unsaid. Katerina's purse sat by the door, her heels kicked off in a careless pile, as if the rooftop had been just another night, another party. The wine glass I'd carried for her stood on the kitchen counter, its contents untouched, the liquid catching the dim light like a still life of my failure. She was already in bed, or pretending to be, her breathing steady, her body turned away from the side where I'd soon lie. I didn't wake her. I didn't want to hear her voice. Not yet. Not when it still carried the echo of dependable, easy. I sat on the couch, the city's glow seeping through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor. My whiskey from earlier burned in my chest, but couldn't drown the questions clawing at me. Asterisk, how long has this been happening? When did I become the man she laughs about with someone else? Asterisk, I replayed the rooftop in my mind, the way her hand fit in Marco's, the tilt of her head, the smile she hadn't given me in months. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, that I'd stitched together a story from shadows. But her words were too sharp, too deliberate, like a blade she'd honed for someone else. The days that followed were a slow bleed. Katerina moved through our life as if nothing had shifted, her routines unchanged. She brewed coffee in the morning, humming some tune I didn't recognize, her hair tied up in a messy bun that used to make me want to pull her close. She'd ask about my day, her voice light, but her eyes never lingered on mine. I answered in monosyllables, my gaze fixed on the steam rising from my mug. Hazelnut creamer, 1 sugar, I thought, pouring her coffee out of habit, even as I wondered why I bothered. She didn't notice the silence growing between us. Or maybe she did and chose to ignore it. I started seeing the signs I'd missed. Her phone, once left face up on the counter, buzzing with texts from friends or Instagram alerts, now stayed face down, always just out of reach. I'd catch her glancing at it, her fingers twitching, as if it held secrets she couldn't share. One night, while we chopped vegetables for dinner, I asked casually, waiting on something important? She didn't look up, just smiled that thin, practiced smile. Just don't want distractions, she said, slicing a carrot with precision. I nodded, but the air felt heavier, like a storm was gathering in the space between us. Asterisk, distractions from what? From me? Asterisk. Then there was the perfume. Katerina had always been a minimalist. Clean linen, soft citrus, scents that faded into memory. But now, a new fragrance clung to her, bold and musky, like a stranger had moved into her skin. It lingered in the bathroom, on her scarf, in the car. I asked about it once, leaning against the doorframe as she got ready for a strategy meeting on a Sunday. What's the new scent? She paused, mid-lipstick, and glanced at me in the mirror. Just a sample from Sephora, she said, her tone too light, too quick, playing around. But she didn't wear it around me, only when she left for the office or slipped out for drinks with the team. The scent became a ghost, haunting the edges of our life, a reminder of the distance I couldn't bridge. Our rhythm was gone. We used to have this banter, sharp and playful, the kind that made friends roll their eyes. I'd toss out a bad pun, she'd fire back with sarcasm, and we'd laugh until our sides ached. Now my jokes landed flat. I'd say something, and she'd blink, her lips curving into a smile that felt like a period, not a comma. Funny, she'd say, already turning away, her attention drifting to her phone or the TV or nothing at all. Even her I love you had changed. It used to be reckless, tossed over her shoulder as she grabbed her keys or mumbled against my chest in the dark. Now, it was mechanical, a box checked before she left for work. Love you, she'd say, the door clicking shut before I could respond. I stopped saying it back, and she didn't notice. In bed, she was a stranger. Her body was there, warm and familiar, but her touch felt like a script she'd memorized. She'd roll away in her sleep, her back a wall I couldn't climb. One night, I suggested a weekend trip, framing it as a chance to reconnect. We've been so busy, I said, keeping my voice steady. Let's get away. Just us. She didn't look up from her laptop, her fingers pausing on the keys. I can't, she said too fast. Q4's a nightmare. Maybe next month. She didn't suggest a date, didn't meet my eyes. I nodded, swallowing the ache, telling myself it was work, stress, a phase. But deep down, I knew. She wasn't tired. She was gone. I blamed myself, of course. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying our years together. The late-night talks, the road trips, the way she'd curl into me during thunderstorms. Or had I faltered? Had I stopped seeing her, stopped making her feel desired? Had I let routine smother the spark? I sifted through memories, searching for the moment I'd lost her. But the harder I looked, the clearer it became. She hadn't asked me to save her. She just left, quietly, while I kept showing up. One morning, we brushed our teeth side by side. Her in my old college hoodie, her face bare of makeup. She caught my eye in a mirror, and for a split second, I saw the woman I'd fallen for, vulnerable, real mine. My heart lurched, hopeful. But then she looked away, rinsed her toothbrush, and walked out without a word. That moment, small as it was, cracked something open. She's not pulling away, I realized. She's already gone. I carried that truth like a stone in my chest, heavy but grounding. I didn't confront her, didn't demand answers. Not because I was weak, but because I needed to see her clearly, without the haze of hope. Every missed sign, her phone, her perfume, her silence, whispered the same truth. I'd been loving a version of her that no longer existed. And as the days passed, I stopped trying to bring her back. I let the silence grow, not as punishment, but as surrender, a quiet acknowledgement that some things can't be fixed, only faced. It was a Saturday morning, the kind that feels like a held breath, quiet, still, with sunlight slipping through the blinds in lazy slants. Katerina was up early, her movements brisk as she pulled on leggings and tied her hair into that effortless knot that always made her look like she belonged in a magazine. "Trader Joe's run," she said, grabbing her keys. "Back in an hour." Her voice was too polished, like a line rehearsed one too many times. She brushed her lips against mine, a kiss so fleeting it barely registered, and then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. I stood in the kitchen, the hum of the fridge filling the silence, and felt a strange unease settle in my bones. Something's off, I thought, but I pushed it down, chalking it up to the paranoia that had haunted me since the rooftop. I tried to keep busy, washed the breakfast dishes, scrubbed the counter, even considered tackling the garage, where my old motorcycle sat under a tarp, waiting for a version of me that hadn't shown up in years. But by 11:30, the apartment felt too small, the walls closing in with questions I couldn't answer. I grabbed my keys, deciding to clear my head with a drive. I took the back route home, a winding shortcut I hadn't used since we first moved to the city, past rusted train tracks and a crumbling strip mall still clinging to a Blockbuster sign. That's when I saw it. Her silver sedan, parked in front of a wine bar called the Velvet Room, its neon sign flickering in the daylight. My stomach dropped. That's not Trader Joe's. I slowed down, squinting to be sure. The yoga sticker on her bumper, inhale, exhale, repeat, confirmed it. My pulse quickened, but I told myself there was an explanation. Maybe she was meeting a friend, grabbing a quick drink to unwind. But deep down, I knew better. You don't wear your favorite pearl earrings or that soft pink lipstick for a grocery run. You don't park at a wine bar at noon on a Saturday unless you're somewhere you shouldn't be. I pulled into the lot, a few spaces away, and cut the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, the air thick with my own hesitation. "Go home," a voice whispered. "You don't need to see this." But I did. I needed the truth, even if it broke me. The bar was dim inside, its warm amber lights a stark contrast to the bright day outside. The air smelled of oak and citrus, undercut by the faint clink of glasses and the murmur of early patrons. A couple shared a charcuterie board at a corner table, their laughter soft. A bartender polished a glass behind the counter, his movements slow and deliberate. And there, at the bar, was Katerina, perched on a stool, one leg crossed over the other, her posture relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. She was laughing, really laughing, her head thrown back, her eyes bright. Marco sat beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back, his grin wide and unguarded. She leaned in, whispering something in his ear, and he chuckled, his fingers brushing her arm. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her gaze locked on his, soft and intimate, the way she used to look at me when we were new, when I was her world. I stood just inside the doorway, my breath shallow, my body rooted to the spot. The world narrowed to that single image, Katerina, glowing, alive, and utterly unreachable. My heart didn't race. It slowed, as if trying to shield me from the pain flooding my chest. This is who she is now, I thought. Not mine. Not anymore. She looked so free, so devastatingly happy, like she'd shed a skin I hadn't known she was wearing. And I was the ghost, watching a life that no longer included me. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. I could have stormed over, demanded answers, let the hurt spill out in shouts. But what would that change? The truth was right there, in her laughter, in the way she leaned into him, in the space where I no longer fit. My eyes burned, but I blinked it away, swallowing the ache. I turned to leave, my steps silent on the hardwood floor, when a voice stopped me. "You okay, son?" It was the bartender, an older man with graying hair and eyes that seemed to see too much. His name tag read Terrace. He leaned against the counter, his hands still on the glass he'd been polishing, his voice low but steady. I shook my head, my throat tight. "No," I managed. "But I will be." He nodded, like he'd heard that answer before, like he knew the weight of moments like this. "Some truths cut deeper than others," he said, his accent faint but warm. "But they're the ones that set you free. Hold on to that." I didn't know why his words landed so hard, why they felt like a lifeline when I was drowning. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes, or the way he didn't push, just let me stand there, a stranger unraveling in his bar. I nodded, unable to say more, and walked out, the daylight harsh against my skin. Back in my car, I sat with the engine off, the air conditioner silent. My hands rested on the wheel, but I didn't drive. I just stared at the wine bar's sign, its neon flickering like a heartbeat. She's gone, I thought, and the words felt final, like a door locking behind me. I don't know how long I sat there, the silence wrapping around me like a shroud. It wasn't anger that filled me, nor heartbreak, but a quiet surrender. The illusion I'd clung to, the one where Katerina and I could still be us, was gone, shattered by the image of her laughter, her ease, her choice. When she came home an hour later, grocery bags in hand, chattering about long lines and forgetting almond milk, I didn't say a word. I helped her unpack, my movements mechanical, my smile a mask. She didn't notice the change in me, or maybe she did and pretended not to. But I'd seen enough. The truth wasn't in her words or her excuses. It was in the bar, in her eyes, in the life she'd chosen without me. And as I stood in our kitchen, the weight of that truth settled in, not as pain, but as clarity. I wasn't her dependable anymore. I was just a man deciding what came next. The motel room smelled of bleach and forgotten summers, its faded wallpaper curling at the edges like secrets trying to escape. A neon sign buzzed outside, casting a sickly green glow through the thin curtains. Katerina had suggested this trip out of nowhere, a weekend away. Just us, she'd said, her voice cracking at the edges, as if she was trying to convince herself more than me. I'd agreed, not because I believed it could stitch us back together, but because I needed to see how far we'd drifted to measure the distance between the life we had and the one we'd lost. We were an hour outside Austin, in a nowhere place of rusty gas stations and hand-painted signs hawking fried pies. The drive had been silent, the kind that hums with the weight of things neither of us dared to say. Katerina fiddled with the radio, settling on static before giving up. I kept my eyes on the road, the horizon blurring into a haze of dust and regret. At the motel, a grizzled clerk handed us a metal key. Room 5, the quietest, he'd said with a nod. Inside, the room was a time capsule, one sagging bed, a lamp with a frayed cord, an ancient TV bolted to the wall. Katerina kicked off her shoes, flipped on the TV, and scrolled through channels of snow and sitcom reruns. She settled on some laugh track comedy, curled up on the bed, and scrolled her phone, her back to me, as if the irony of her distraction wasn't carving me open. I locked myself in the bathroom, the fluorescent light buzzing like a trapped fly. The shower ran too hot, scalding my skin, but I stood under it, letting the water burn away the last threads of denial. "Why are we here, Katia?" I thought, my hands braced against the tiles. Asterisk, is this guilt? A last-ditch effort? or just a way to say we tried before you walk away. Asterisk, the steam clouded the mirror, erasing my reflection, and for a moment, I was grateful not to see the man I'd become, someone who waited, who hoped, who loved a woman who'd already left. When I stepped back into the room, Katerina was asleep or pretending to be, her body curled toward the wall, the remote still clutched in her hand. Her breathing was soft, her lips parted, her face peaceful in a way that felt like a lie. I lay beside her, careful not to let our bodies touch. The mattress dipped under my weight, but she didn't stir. I stared at the ceiling, its water stains mapping a constellation of my failures. There were no arguments, no tearful confessions, just silence. A silence that spoke louder than any words we'd stopped saying. In that quiet, something left me. Not love, not exactly, that had been fading for months. Not anger, either, that had burned out in the wine bar's dim light. It was hope, this stubborn belief that I could bring her back, that I could be enough. That version of me died in that motel bed, and I let it go without a fight. Back home, I changed. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in the small, deliberate choices that mark a man reclaiming himself. I stopped making her coffee, stopped asking about her day, stopped looking up when she walked into the room. I turned to the garage, to the motorcycle I hadn't touched in years. The air there smelled of grease and possibility, and I lost hours to wrenches and gears. The music loud, grunge she hated, all distorted guitars and raw vocals. It felt good to work on something that made sense, something I could fix with my hands. Katerina noticed, though she didn't say it outright. She'd linger in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching me. One night, her voice was small, almost uncertain. "What are you doing out here every night?" I didn't look up, my fingers black with oil. "Fixing something," I said, and let the words hang. She didn't ask again. She tried to pull me back in her way. She cooked my favorite pasta, left the cold beer in the fridge, wore my old hoodie that still smelled faintly of cedar and us. But her gestures felt like echoes, apologies for a truth she wouldn't name. I didn't want apologies. I wanted honesty, and that had slipped through my fingers long ago. So I kept my distance, not out of spite, but because I was done chasing a ghost. I started taking walks after dinner, no destination, just the crunch of gravel under my shoes, the fading lights stretching across the neighborhood. I'd nod at strangers, pet a dog if it trotted up, savoring the simplicity of moments that asked nothing of me. I began journaling again, at first just fragments, bullet points of anger, guilt, memories I needed to unload. But soon, the words grew into sentences, then stories, some about us, most not. I wrote about the man I used to be, the one who sketched road trips in notebooks, who dreamed up tattoos, who woke up with ideas instead of doubts. I'd buried him under years of compromise, but now he was clawing his way out, piece by piece. "I'm still here," I wrote one night, the pen shaking in my hand. "And I'm not done." Katerina felt it, the shift in me. One evening, she stood in the garage doorway, her silhouette framed by the kitchen light. "You're so quiet lately," she said, her voice tight, like she was testing the waters. "Yeah," I said, wiping my hands on a rag, my eyes on the engine. "I am." She lingered, waiting for more, but I had nothing left to give. She turned and left, her footsteps fading into the house. That was the thing. She only noticed me slipping when I was already gone. I'd spent months screaming for her attention in the only ways I knew how. The coffee, the questions, the waiting. But when she didn't hear me, I stopped raising my voice. Silence became my language, and it said everything. Asterisk, I'm not angry. I'm not broken. I'm just done. Asterisk. Her efforts grew louder, desperate. She played our old playlists, hummed in the kitchen, laughed too hard at things that weren't funny. She filled the house with noise, as if it could drown out the truth. But I'd already left, not in body, but in spirit. I was a man rebuilding himself, and she was no longer part of the blueprint. The silence between us wasn't punishment. It was clarity, the kind that comes when you stop fighting for someone who's already chosen to let you go. The kitchen was bathed in morning light, the kind that makes everything look softer, forgiving. I stood at the sink, washing dishes, watching the sun glint off the wet plates. The house was quiet, save for the faint drip of the faucet and Katerina's footsteps as she moved through the bedroom, getting ready for the day. She'd been trying harder lately, cooking my favorite meals, playing our old songs, wearing that faded hoodie of mine that used to mean something. But her efforts were like rain on a window, sliding off without leaving a mark. I wasn't cold, wasn't cruel. I was just done pretending, done reaching for someone who'd stopped reaching back. The shift had been gradual, but undeniable. I no longer flinched when she brushed past me, no longer waited for her to look up from her phone. I'd stopped being the man who filled the silence with questions, who chased her affection like a dog after a bone. Instead, I'd found solace in the garage, where the motorcycle was nearly finished, its chrome gleaming under the work light. I poured myself into it, every bolt, every gear, rebuilding something that didn't ask me to be less than I was. I'd started writing again, too, filling notebooks with stories that weren't about us, about loss, but about roads untraveled, about a man waking up to himself. Each word felt like a step away from the version of me Katerina had reduced to dependable, easy. She felt the change, though she didn't know how to name it. Her laughter grew louder, her gestures more frantic, like she was trying to drown out the quiet that had settled between us. She'd come in the kitchen, leave notes on the fridge, suggest movie nights we never had. But I was no longer in the room, not emotionally. I'd faded, not out of anger, but out of necessity, because loving someone who doesn't choose you is a kind of death, and I was tired of dying. It came to a head at her parents' house, a Sunday dinner that smelled of roasted garlic and red wine. The table was crowded with her family, her mom's warm smile, her dad's bad jokes, her sister's kids chasing each other around the living room. Katerina was in her element, charming everyone, her laughter bright. Then she made a joke at my expense, something about my garage obsession, her tone light but sharp, the way it always was when she wanted the spotlight. The room chuckled, expecting me to play along, to toss back a quip like I used to. But I didn't. I set my fork down, looked at her, and saw the truth in her eyes, a flicker of fear because she knew I wasn't hers anymore. "Thank you for the wine," I said to her mom, standing. "I've got to go." My voice was calm, no edge, no drama. Katerina's smile faltered, but she didn't stop me. No one did. I walked out, the night air cool against my skin, the stars sharp above. I didn't feel anger, didn't feel triumph. I felt free. Back home, I became a ghost in our shared space. I moved around her, not avoiding but not engaging. She tried to draw me in, her hand on my arm, a soft, "Are we okay?" But I'd shrug, my silence louder than any argument. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting myself, building a life that didn't depend on her presence. I went for walks, wrote late into the night, fixed the last pieces of the motorcycle. And one morning, standing at the sink, the sun warm on my face, it hit me. I was alive again. Not waiting, not hurting, just breathing, whole in a way I hadn't been in years. I told her it was over a week later. We were in the living room, the TV muttering in the background. She was on the couch, scrolling her phone, when I sat across from her. "Katya," I said, my voice steady. "We're done." She looked up, her eyes wide, then glassy. "What?" "Lucas, we can fix this. I'll try harder, Her words tumbled out, desperate, but I shook my head. "You made a choice," I said. "And it wasn't me." She cried, her hands twisting in her lap, her voice breaking as she tried to bargain. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for things to. Please, let's just talk." But I'd heard enough apologies, enough half-truths. I didn't need her confession, didn't need her to say Marco's name. I'd seen the truth in the wine bar, in her laughter, in the way she'd stopped being mine long before I stopped being hers. I packed a bag that night, just the essentials. The motorcycle was ready, its engine purring when I tested it in the driveway. Katerina stood in the doorway, her face streaked with tears, but I didn't look back. I straddled the bike, the weight of it solid beneath me, and rode out into the dusk. The city fell away, the roads stretching open before me, endless and uncharted. The wind roared in my ears, carrying away the weight of her words, dependable, easy, until all I heard was my own heartbeat, steady and strong. I didn't know where I was going, and that was the point. For the first time in years, I wasn't following a script, wasn't waiting for someone else to choose me. I was Lucas, not the man she'd laughed about, not the placeholder, but the one who'd survived the worst kind of betrayal and found something better, himself. The horizon glowed, a thin line of gold against the darkening sky, and I rode toward it free. Tara's words echoed in my mind, quiet but clear. Some truths set you free. He was right. Katarina's choice had cost her the man who'd loved her, but had given me back the man I'd forgotten. And as the miles blurred beneath me, I felt it, a new dawn, not just in the sky, but in me. I wasn't broken. I was beginning.